around the high schoolers, but what level, like, when do the younger grades, the middle grades, have more experience into like shadowing high school or getting that experience? I know there's some group work maybe where they're with the high schoolers, but you know, she's very vocal at her age, and as this high school choice comes into play, you know, I want her input into it as well. So I want to make sure she's having experience with high school. So what shadowing or crossover is there?
We're in the process now of setting up shadow days for the current 8th graders. We haven't done that in the past for 7th graders, but it's not off the table.
Okay.
We do with the 7th grade, we do smaller things. Like, so yesterday? Was it yesterday?
Yes.
We just all went on a walk together, and we made them pair up with either a 7th or 8th grader with a high school student. And we just went on a walk for morning movement. And we gave them some questions to, start talking about, but the goal was really just to go and be on a walk together. There's a camping trip at the end of the year between 6th and 7th grade, sort of connect that campus with this campus. There's things like that. And then there's opportunities where, growing throughout the year, they just spend increasing amounts of like social time together and that sort of thing.
Community lunches, who sits at the table is always sort of
very intentionally, curated. So
and then the immersions and things like that. So there are some of those experiences, but we can certainly look at more, because I do understand how much these kids sort of look to the future. And I'll just also, this is not directly answering your question, but I was so happy my daughter answered the question about her thinking about high school, because we did actually have this whole rubric process she went through where she got to really look at what would be next. And I was also happy she picked here, but she did get to have some of that with our family sort of as mediators in the process. And that looking forward was really big for her in also helping to sort of calm her into a transition.
Tell them about what the rubric was.
Sure. So she came up with the things that were important to her in a high school. So basically we set it up where she had to come up with a rubric of what do I really want out of a high school experience. So the decision was only kind of hers, actually, because of that. And then she got to pick a panel of family members who got to actually sort of make the decision based on what she told them about the experiences. And then we had her do visiting days in local schools. I think she went to one of the private schools, one of the public schools, and then a couple weren't doing visiting days at the time, so she just researched them online, and she filled out this actual document about what I liked and what I don't like, and sort of rated them. And at the end, her top rating, so she basically graded them the way that I grade students, this category matters most and these sorts of things. And Waldorf won out. But she still, in many ways, didn't want to go. She felt some of my friends aren't going, and my dad teaches there, and these sorts of things. And so she still didn't want to go. Not fully. She was I recognize this, but so she had this intellectual, I recognize this is best, but she was challenged emotionally. And that's where not actually letting it up to her was really important, because then there was a panel of people that also importantly were not me, who said but you said, but you said, but you said. And so at the end, she sort of grudgingly admitted, yes, this is actually what I want. And I can safely say that while there's still sort of wistful talk sometimes about these other places, she's definitely happy here. She doesn't say, I want to leave, I want to go to another place. Really what she says is I want to go to a big dance or something like that. She's going to the CVU dance this weekend. She's really excited about that. But she's also really happy that she's not actually in the classes. And I don't want to make any comment about how CBU is. I really don't know. I just know that for her, she's getting what she wanted. And she rated it, but the decision was ultimately not actually hers. We used her own rubric for the decision, which felt like a nice balance for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to share, thanks, Erin. I have heard this about the challenge that Waldorf schools are having with enrollment from a teacher here when I had a parent-teacher conference. And then when I was back in DC visiting our old school, I did a tour of our old school. Both the teacher here and the enrollment director there said, the problem we're seeing now is that the kids are making those decisions, not the parents. So they get to 8th grade, they want to go in a different direction. And the values and what's special about Waldorf at that age, and a lot of families are, all right, they don't want to do it anymore. And then it's also the finances in terms of the tuition here. But I thought it was so interesting that 2 weeks later, I heard the same thing down in DC that I heard here about parents are no longer directing and kids are being allowed, just making their choice about high school.
Yeah, we definitely do hear that quite a bit about like, well, we'll see what they want. And I know I made the greatest decisions when I was in middle school, but not
They, sounds like we just took your whole Waldorf philosophy and worked with her and saying, you and put a panel together. It was a really great way of giving her the power, empowering her.
Thank you. I wasn't really sure at the time, but afterwards I was really happy about it.
Yeah.
Can any of you assuage our fears of the I'm not learning anything proclamation that comes on?
Yeah, I don't. In my experience, 12-year-olds have a fairly narrow understanding of cognition and intellectual development. They're lovely, smart kids, but when they say they don't learn anything, what they mean is they don't feel like they are gathering facts. And I feel like, you just saw examples of students who are, not only know some great facts, but have a great sense of how to relate with their learning, how to relate with their growth. And, I could, make a long list of all the facts that the students learn here, but the truth is 50% of those facts are going to be out of date by the time they're adults. So it's much more relevant that these kids know how to learn, how to enjoy learning, how to engage with their own intellect and their own curiosity, because that's what will help them learn the new fact that has yet to exist when they're 25 years old that we can't even imagine. And I also see kids comparing with their friends in public school who say, oh, I got an A- on my test on Cartesian graphing. And then you ask the kid, that same student who got the A-, well, tell me a little bit about Cartesian geography. No, I don't know, I just got an A- on my test, that's all I know. So, I don't know, other folks want to take a stab at this one?
I'll jump in quickly with a very sort of limited anecdotal perspective, but the girl on the end, Ellie, is my daughter, and she tells me the same thing, and I taught her, and I know nothing. So just, I understand there's more to that question than just that, but I will also say, I can be like, what'd you learn in math today? And she'll be like, I don't know. I'm like, oh, what's happening here? So it is a pretty universal thing.
And one little final piece on that. is that, something particular about the Waldorf perspective on child development is that forgetting is part of learning. It's part of how we teach, is we expect children to go to sleep and wake up, and sometimes they remember some things, sometimes they don't, and we tease out certain threads over time, but we kind of plan for them to forget. It's part of why we try to spiral our curriculum upwards. And I think it's important to acknowledge that part of learning is forgetting about things and then remembering them later.
I have one final little anecdote about that. What Sage just said reminded me of my very first year here, where I was teaching calculus to the seniors and one junior, and coming from a public school setting where it was highly prescribed what you needed to know before you entered calculus, and if you didn't know those things, you couldn't enter calculus. I was often surprised by the things that the class didn't know. It's like, oh, you don't know summation notation? Whew, okay, that's going to take a month to teach you summation notation. Because when I taught that in public schools, it took a month. Because the kids were really ready to learn it. It took me 2 days to teach that senior class how to do this thing that had took me 2.5 weeks maybe in the public schools to teach, because they had that relationship with their learning experience. They had that spiraling foundation that Sage is describing. And so there is this question of kind of developmental readiness to learn a thing that we pay a lot of attention to there.
This may be this might not be answerable, but because there's no junior class, and it's about college admissions. And it came to me because, second grade at some cool pop-up dinner where I was meeting parents of all different ages, they said, well, wait till you see how they do college. And I'm so curious what that means. And I was always going to say, Amy, this would be a great night to have a conversation. So it might be to be continued.
No, it's active. So we have a colleague who was a teacher here for a long time, who has started her college consulting business. My son has so far worked with her and gotten into every single one of the colleges he has heard back from so far. He's heard back from 5. He has 5 more to hear back from. And not only did he get into every single one of them, they gave him a big fat scholarship to each and every one. Her name is Alice. Alice started here many years ago as a French teacher. She was the head of the high school for a while. And she developed this interest in helping kids with college. And so for many years, she's been doing that. Right now, we continue to have a relationship with Alice where we're sending her information about how students are doing. When students are juniors, Alice begins to meet with them. This happened last year with the folks last year too. Alice begins to meet with them on a regular basis to begin talking about the college process. Alice facilitates meetings between the students and college reps who come to the school. There's a lot of colleges who find our school particularly desirable, and they make sure they get down here to pitch their college to the kids. And Alice helps folks write essays and decide on what schools suit their, what schools are the best match for their students, and continues to work on that through, senior year. And I've, seen the extraordinary work she does with my own son, and it's really, she's a pro. And I think when your friend said, wait till you see what they do with college, I can't imagine that they weren't talking about Alice and these regular meetings that Alice has, usually during lunchtime, so they don't miss a class or whatever. They all sit down and have lunch together, and they just sort of talk about how to think about colleges, how to look at colleges, how to research colleges, and what it means to go to college, and what it then means for them as an individual to find a place that they have the right relationship with. And we've sent kids to fancy private liberal arts schools. We've sent kids to state schools. We've sent kids to voc and tech schools. And we've had a couple of kids who, with their families decided, maybe college isn't your thing. So we've really had a whole gamut of folks. Anything I'm missing on that?
Yeah, I mean, we were doing it last year actively, and we, like Eric said, we're still working with Alice even this year, even though nobody's in the process.
Been around Waldorf for 13 years now, and I've always been blown away by the high percentage of students at Waldorf that go to college. And what is that distinction between, and I don't know the numbers, I don't know the standard deviation, but when we're talking about the high school down the road or in the community, what makes Waldorf shine without going back to, the Alice aspect?
I think I can speak a little bit to that on this like personal experience of having gone through Waldorf High School and then gone to college not terribly long ago. One thing that I felt uniquely prepared for in college was being able to speak in a seminar discussion. The majority of my classmates who came from other schools had almost never spoken in class. My sister went to public school. She and I have talked about her public school trauma and classes where she never spoke the whole year. Like 11th grade science, she's like, I didn't speak in that class. Didn't feel like I could. Never spoke to the teacher, never answered a question, never spoke to, like that happens. It happens all the time. And students go to college thinking that they're maybe able to continue doing that, maybe not thinking about it at all. I felt so prepared to do that, and I think everyone in my Waldorf class felt prepared on that kind of verbal seminar level, and that's a huge part of what we do here. Huge part of the way I teach is just discussing things, and I think that's a college readiness thing that's very real.
I'll also just add in that I think to some extent, some of the sort of drive comes from the fact that we tend to be pretty passionate about what we're doing. Students tend to get pretty passionate. I mean, if you look at, what Sage was talking about, to like in terms of what's the question and these different questions the students have asked, their ability to teach each other. I know Rebecca touched on it too. There is a lot of passion in the students for things. We encourage that passion, and we're also helping them engage with it in a really meaningful way. In the climatology block I had in December, we talked a lot about there's a lot of data here, and how do you make decisions on that data? And I started walking students through some of that and showing how complicated it can be. And one of the things that some of them told me afterwards was not so much that they came away like, yep, got this climate science down, but rather they came saying like, wow, there's a lot of things you could ask here. This sort of forward momentum they were coming out of it with. I didn't, and I recognize the ways this could sound bad, but I didn't answer their questions. I gave them questions they wanted to answer. And so I think that also helps a lot, because there's this drive that's coming, if we're talking about the self-motivational aspect, that causes our students to go forward, succeed, advocate for themselves, things that make them successful in other places beyond just college too. I think that we really encourage a lot of those things.
Can I add to the answer?
Sure.
I just wanted to add that I think Waldorf students have a deep joy of learning, and that's what we're typically trying to strive for. They also have been incredibly challenged at some point in their education, and they have failed at something. Maybe it's art, maybe it's math, maybe it's speaking in front of the class, but they have found a place that they needed to grow, and so they're not afraid of failure, which was my challenge when I got to college, where I failed miserably and was like, oh, I've never had this experience before. So I think that is a huge benefit.
So for me, coming here tonight has just validated my love for Waldorf, and you all have just sort of made me excited for our daughter to continue Waldorf.